Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me once again, Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cam?
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
What's going on is today we're going to be talking more and more about Metaphor ReFantazio. I am nearing the end game. I was letting you know that before we started recording. You're maybe about half to 60% of the way through, probably based on where you are at. You said you got your...
I received my sixth party member. Yeah, sixth official party member.
Yep. So yeah, we'll talk some more about our thoughts on that and the game. And then I also went and saw We Live in Time this weekend with Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh, so I'll give some thoughts on that movie. If you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. So yeah, I think we'll treat this as maybe a little bit of like a mini, like not spoiler cast, but like we'll be a little bit more loose with spoilers up to maybe where you are in the game. So I'll give that caveat to people up front in terms of like, hey, we might talk about kind of the first chunk of the game, whereas like last week we were a little bit more vague about stuff. So yeah, to where you're at, Cameron, what have you been thinking? Any new thoughts on the game overall?
Sure. My biggest thought is, I thought for sure Remake was going to be a lock for my game of the year this year. Metaphor is making a unbelievably strong argument why it might be the one to take the case. It is, this game is phenomenal on just about every level. I will also say, I rescind my opinion about how it's nice that there's no romance in this game. I am rescinding that. I have gotten to know some of the characters better already, and because I've already cleared out like four social or four of the follower links. I have maxed out, and I'm like, I have a lot of strong feelings about each of these characters, and some of them I'm just like,
Wish we could have had a little kissy kiss.
Yeah, wish could like just some generalized romance. Granted, like some of them, it's just like there's one where it's like I can see why people wanted to romance her. I don't want to butcher her name, but it's the Lady Knight, Hulkenberg. I get why people want to romance her. It does not feel right to romance her for me, because you have such a it's so focused on the idea of etiquette, and I do want to put a caveat here. When I say chivalry, I don't mean like the modern interpretation of like the flowery courtly love aspect of chivalry. I'm talking about like what it means when like mountain combatants are supposed to be rolling up to each other to like have combat. What is the decorum that you act with? Like the very much the like combat sort of honor and chivalry and duty. Like that is what her entire shtick is about, and like her entire story is about. And at no point did I feel romantic in that situation, at all.
Yeah, there's also a fun little HR bit of like, well, there's a power dynamic here too,
massively
at play. But yeah, I like Hulkenberg. I don't jump in the Reddits or anything like that, so I don't have a sense of like where the community's at in terms of like, oh, they wish they could have romanced so and so. Given those those early couple companions you get, like when we talked last week, I had already finished Stroll's whole through line, and I think I kind of alluded to the idea that like if you want to read that as romantic, you like there are definitely choices and options that you're given in terms of like, yeah, I'll be there to rebuild your town with you, kind of thing. Yeah. And like
you clearly could have taken that into a romantic.
You can infer a romantic connection there. But yeah, Hulkenberg, I didn't see it, and I didn't get that vibe with her. And obviously, Heisme is not really going for that kind of relationship and dynamic.
Yeah, no, Heisme is like, there was a TikToker who was like, his whole thing was like, I'm your Korean dad, and it's like just an older Korean dude who's just like you did a great job today. We're gonna go to the market. Come on, like, and it's like a very very wholesome thing. And Heisme has that energy of like, Heisme is like, not gonna get into spoilers on his story, but like,
it's a much more paternal relationship. Yeah.
That man has been through some stuff that it's a major plot point about like what he's been through, so that's why I'm not spoiling it at this point. But like, he is such a great character, but it is 100% a paternal aspect to it, to the point where there's a moment where all of a sudden he pulls out some racism that I wasn't expecting against the Carapace. And I'm like, huh. And it's like, there's progress like that is identified and talked about and approached, and it's like it's a whole thing, and I'm like, I really respect that. It's not done in like an overt way, but it's very much like a like and honestly it really pays back into like when we're talking about like kind of the greater themes of this game and why I think it really reaches those heights is you have full on display like a very like good critique on racism and xenophobia and stuff, which is like, you'd be like, oh yeah, sure. Like media touches on that. It's like not Japanese media. Japanese media is like large, like because Japan is a largely homogenous country made up of like a large majority of just a single national identity for most people. There are plenty of videos out there and plenty of people who've talked about like the very casual racism that exists in Japan, much less the institutionalized racism against foreigners in general. Even if you're born in Japan, if you are not born into a Japanese family, you're never going to be considered a Japanese citizen. Like, they have very strict laws on that sort of stuff. And so, like, this is one of those moments where it's like, oh, wow, these, like, the depth at which we're getting this level of a story where the Carapace and the Carapace thing that I brought up earlier is a great example of institutionalized race competitiveness on the lower classes, like basically taking the lower class, the working class, and then dividing them up by race, and then basically pitting them against each other, is something that the ruling class does in a lot of societies. And it's very clear that's what's happened here in this society as well. And so you have the quote unquote slave races, like they literally call them slave races in the memoriam. And it's just like, it is just like textbook like stuff that you're seeing here with an like is not put out there overtly. It is there subtly, and it's done deftly. And I'm just constant like being impressed by the way that it is approaching these themes and these matters in a way that it could really come off cringy and hokey. I'm going to help everybody, and I'm going to do all that. But they approach it in a way that's very much like a character's understanding, like, yeah, it should be this way. And I know that we're not there yet. I know it's not going to happen overnight. I know we need to make progress. But the big thing about especially Haizume's like story overall is like a very much a somebody who's been greatly wronged by quote unquote accident. Like there was no larger conspiracy to hurt Haizume at all. Like with his backstory, it is just the circumstances of his situation. And the way that evolves and the way that it's like, it brings up the conversation of change for the sake of future generations is handled so well. And I flat out, when I maxed out his link, did you max out his link?
Yeah, I've maxed out everybody.
That's right. You told me
where
that,
I'm at. I'm very end game at this point. I'm basically like doing all of the stuff to fill up all the final meters, do some final side quests before going into what I believe is going to be the final dungeon and fights.
I fucking bawled like a little baby at the end of his because it's so beautiful. There's a couple moments where I've teared up. One was just like a very casual moment on the island that I'm at right now. You can do a thing during day or night, and it will give you a massive boost to one of two stats, depending on if it's day or night. I did the night one, and it was done. Like the art was so beautiful. The music really was the touchstone. I think the music in this game is just like incredible. It's beyond phenomenal. The use of orchestrals and like gothic choir aspects of it, of like these, like, I don't think gothic's the right word, but like very much like church choir, deep like reverberies and everything going through it.
Yeah, I mean the island you're on especially has such a like interesting like Polynesian kind of vibe to it, including in the music and the like. There's a lot of like rhythmic chanting that we get, and we get that in some of the like more sanctism centric locations as well.
That stuff is way more church choir, like epic stuff that you hear in the trailers and stuff. This one is like when you're in the big dungeon for that area.
Yeah.
The music there is spectacular. It is eerie. It is mood, like the mood and vibe is perfect for it. Like the music has not stopped like just nailing the vibe of what the scene is built up on to the point where I have teared up multiple times just off of music cues. Like the music is so damn good. Like it's like, oh, or how are they going to approach like this sort of music when kind of like heavy, dark synth is like the Shin Megami Tensei soundtrack, the kind of pop, rock, like J-pop, J-rock aspects of the Persona series. What is Metaphor? And Metaphor is just absolutely just killing it. I think it's their best soundtrack yet that I've experienced so far. I still have half the game to go, but I've been blown away by it. But also the way that they're also introducing twists and turns into it, the lamp shading that they do, kind of setting up a lot of stuff. Like there's some serious, like a couple of Chekhov's guns that are just loaded, ready to fire off at any time right now that that the story's just juggling. And it's pretty great. I think it's been pretty great so far.
This happens every now and then. I don't think lamp shading's the right term.
You're right. Sorry. Foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is the word I wanted to use, not lamp shading. My apologies.
Yeah.
The foreshadowing is top notch. Like I am seeing the pieces being put together as they're happening, and I'm just impressed by the delivery on it.
I'm looking very forward to going back through and doing like the New Game Plus run with the knowledge of the story and the mythos of the world and the bigger plot points and stuff like that now in my head, so I can kind of pick out more and more of those beats and stuff. In that dungeon in particular, the one you just completed,
the big one, right?
Because
I've done a couple of the smaller ones for social, like the social link ones, but not that.
Yeah, so I always refer to the dungeons being like the big, like this is the one you have like a time limit on, and you need to go in, and they're the ones that have like a Magla room that you can like hide away in.
There you
the
go.
Other ones don't have those.
That's right. I think that's a good qualification
on that. The little side questy locations that are like kind of, there might be multiple levels, but they're pretty much you go in and they're intended to be done in one go. Whereas like the Magla room stuff is all, admittedly, I always do them in one go anyway, but like they're intended to be like, okay, here's the checkpoint if you need to leave and go back and level up and then come back and try again, or go like, hey, maybe you've run out of MP, because that's most likely what's happening.
That is usually what happens.
Is you've run out of MP and you don't have any more items or anything that can like restore your MP. So you're gonna have to go and like leave the dungeon and restart. That's the biggest pain point early in the game. Eventually, you'll get like abilities and stuff abilities and gear that'll give you like in the classic Persona Shin Megami Tensei, like like every turn you'll restore a little bit, and or there's
like the mage and healer archetypes have the overworld where if you're defeating enemies without having to go into squad mode, you get a massive chunk of health and MP back, which I'm also going to put out there. I have abused the ever-loving shit out of that system. I am level 50 at this point. I don't know if that's like, I've looked at like the kind of like other people. Not a lot of people were doing it, but like other people were as well. I was like, okay, cool. This is an awesome system to be like, hey, do you want to grind? Because if you want to grind, here's an easier way for you to grind. You get one of those like melancholia buds going on. It may be one or two of them. They spawn out just like jabronis and just like murdering them. I have grinded out and maxed out so many archetypes doing that, because when you master an archetype, you get the leaf, the hero leaf from it. And that's free 1,000 XP for your archetypes. And so, especially when you get newer party members and it's like, oh, well, their initial one is technically an adept. So it's not a beginner one, but so it's going to level up even slower. Like, what do you do to like beef them up? And it was 100% that. I did that. I did not realize that one of the party members, it's relied on like key items that you put together with more. So I was like, why is she not getting more abilities? Also, the last two that you get,
two of them have
two of them have those. The way of introducing, like, hey, how do we like even out the mechanic for our late edition party members and make them like viable and approachable, so they're not just like, well, I already have my main 4. I don't want to swap them out. Like, doing that is just a brilliant thing. The baton pass they introduced here for it as well is great. So.
Yeah, I don't like the baton pass in this because it takes a full turn, it takes full action, and so it's basically like I wish there was an ability that like let you swap out at no cost is basically what I'd be looking for in that. But all that said,
Herkenberg has a part of their social link stuff lets them come in for like half.
There are some that it's like, oh, it'll be like if you pass to the next player, it is only half a turn kind of thing. And so yeah, there's that kind of thing. But
for sure though, that is a bit of a frustrating thing, but also it's nice that you don't have to get that through like a social link.
The thing I appreciated more and why I was more open to keeping the new party members in my crew is because I had leveled up all the other party members. The social links, once you get to a certain point, it's like they get the same amount of XP if they're in reserve.
Yes.
So there's no like penalty to them not being around. But whereas my new members are still going to have that penalty until I can level them up. So I was like, I'll go ahead and keep them in my kind of core crew, find the new like normal. My protagonist is the one, like he's, I've like got 60% plus of the archetypes done with him kind of at this point. I think right now I'm around level 70 for my characters.
Oh shoot, okay.
I didn't grind out too much in that regard, with the kind of stuff you're doing. But like I am now at a point. I just did in the third city. You've got like the Coliseum that you can go and do.
Yeah.
In kind of the like end game section that I'm in, I went in finally and like did all of those ranks and then switched over because you do like the ranked battles or you do like the competition things where it's like here's the challenge to move you up the ranking, and then once you're in bronze ranking, you can do like a gauntlet mode run.
Oh, nice.
A silver run and a gold run, and like each have different tiers of enemies, and it's basically like you can fight as many battles as you want up to 30. And there's like a trophy for doing like 30 battles in gold, uninterrupted kind of thing. And in the gold, like I did the 30 gold in like my first attempt because my protagonist had like was super powered up with like magic, so he had like attacks that could do like fire, ice, and lightning damage to all enemies.
Nice.
And he has some abilities that are basically like if you use a synthesis move, it costs half as much HP. So and another one of my characters, it basically has an ability that after every battle, everybody restores some MP.
Dang,
which is another thing that's gonna come in handy much in late game stuff.
That's sick.
And so I'm doing these battles, and I'm like getting back more MP than I'm losing in most of the fights. Like most of the fights, I can just have my protagonist synthesis. I'm gonna say Firaga because I don't remember what the persona terms are for everything, but like do the like third level of fire to all enemies, and half of them are weak against it, but even the ones that aren't, I'm killing them in like one shot basically. And so it took me 10-15 minutes to go through the 30 rounds, and that was the most like grinding thing that I felt like I'd actually done, of like, oh yeah, I'm watching the XP because I'm doing this, I'm not taking any damage from any of these fights, so like everybody's getting like the bonus for not being hit.
It's so good.
It was I was like, oh, I definitely, if I had done this kind of stuff earlier, I probably wouldn't have struggled as much in a couple of the dungeons. That said, like I have been able to like one shot the dungeons. The one that I started this off with was the one that you just did. I felt that was the first one I felt like this one is really long. Yeah. I wish this one wasn't as long. And it was like I was burning through a lot of my like MP restoring items that I wish I I wish I had more like automatic MP recovery for that dungeon, but I made it through and yeah, but it was just like, oh, this is the first one that even playing on easy mode, because I'm not looking for like a grandiose challenge for this game. I'm looking for the story and stuff. Like to that, even on easy mode, there are very hard things in this game.
Yeah.
And there will be fights where it's like, oh, this is just pure luck of the draw in terms of like, if you get a good run of the enemy's attacks, you might be okay. If you get a bad run of the enemy's attacks, you're fucked and half your party died. And all right, L3, I'm going to restart this fight.
Which is we talked about it last episode, our last show, but the L3 restart, if it's just like, oh, hey, I got attacked, or, oh, hey, this is just not a great run of moves that I'm up against. Yeah. I did not make the right decisions or anything. Getting that restart for free is, like, beautiful.
I spam it. I don't do it as much now that I'm, like, in the end game and I don't need a lot of the items that I was stealing from enemies earlier on. But earlier on, I would absolutely, if Heismay didn't steal the thing, like, first turn out that I was trying to get from the a boss fight or an enemy or something like that, it was an instant L3.
There you go.
To basically, let me steal from this guy so I don't have to worry about that anymore.
There you go.
I can free up that, turn per round to do damage or do a stat thing or something. So yeah, just like knocking that annoyance little thing out of the table. Or it'd be the kind of thing of like, oh, I try and steal something and oh, this enemy doesn't have anything. Well, that was a waste of a turn. Yep. L3. Let me restart that,
absolutely,
knowing that this enemy doesn't have anything worth taking.
Yep. There's that. I will also say,
and also there will be sometimes I will play through a few rounds just so I can kind of go through all the different abilities,
the info about
and
them,
be like, okay. And this is another thing that I don't have to do as much now, because later on you get a character that kind of levels up an ability that gives you a better analysis going into fights. So it's a little bit more thorough and you don't need to do that trial and error bit. But yeah, there are plenty of times where I'm just like, all right, you do fire, you do ice, you do lightning, you do wind, you do heals, you do dark or light and dark. And okay, now we know what this enemy is elementally weak to. Restart and let's go from there.
Yep. I will say, like grinding out also is, I just want to give a massive shout out to the merchant archetype. Mm-hmm. At first I was like, oh, a capitalism archetype. And then I realized it's like, no, it's beating people to death with math, basically. You have this giant abacus that you run around with.
Yeah.
And it's I'm currently sitting on over 600,000 gold right now.
Yeah.
Because when grinding out, I was like, oh, well, I can grind out more money if I use this, and I already had them mastered out. So I was like, why not? And I just did that, and I rake in so much money. Mm-hmm. It's insane. I'm so happy with this. Like the entire setup of it is just you hit people with an abacus, and then you can throw money and do critical almighty damage at people. It's great.
For one of those like classes that you now have that you're gonna have to like craft some stuff to unlock a lot of their abilities, there's a shop on the island that is like, oh, it has the crafting pieces and they're like 100,000 a piece. So buy those on an idle way, day or whatever, where they're on sale, and B, just be mindful that like you probably have some expensive costs coming down the line.
I already know that because because also on the island I'm at as well is there's a big jump in healing items that you get in that point where the healing items are much better, but also they cost much more.
Yeah.
Significantly better. I love that there is like here's the curve. You are making the money curve at this point of like you are now exponentially having it costing more, but at the same time they just give you so many ways to grind out experience. I have several archetypes that are not fully mastered. Their tree isn't fully mastered, but I've like on my main character, my protagonist, I have maxed out all of the basic archetypes that I've gotten so far. With a couple of exceptions because they're actually adepts. Like the ones that belong to the last two party members that I picked up, those are adepts, and so they require me to pick up other ones as well. I just think that's awesome. The entire progress, the job tree that exists with the archetypes has so much depth to it, and at the same time, I'm also really glad they just didn't arbitrarily name them like after demons or anything. It's just like it's very much a this one's the gunner, this one's the seeker, the warrior. Like we're going very basic on this. They could have gotten more esoteric, more playing with that sort of thing, but this time they're around. They're just like nah, it's just straightforward. Now it plays into like when you unlock Moore's his follower link, like it makes sense why they are this basic, because of what they're tied to with the Hero Kings and everything. I'm also really curious. Like, there's a lot of plot points I also want to say that I am like hooked on. I just want to know more about it. Like, we've now, at first I thought the Hero Kings were like story things, and now it's like, no. They really existed. And there's like physical things that you see. Like one of the stopping points you go that's like a tourist attraction is about the mage Hero King. And I'm like, cool, okay. And the idea that each of these archetypes is like a phase of this greater actual like archetype that I found out is like I don't even have access to yet, is really, really cool. Also, shout out to I completed my Moore's thing, so I now understand what that scroll is that has my name on it. That was really cool. The way that they like that kind of like meta talk about it. It's like, hey, what's your name?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, like the reveal on that is awesome.
Yeah. Plus, there's a lot of fun reveals just in the dungeon you just did as well.
Oh yeah, the dungeon I just did is like
the before times world kind of thing. Yeah.
Mind blown like stuff where it's like they tease it. The foreshadowing they give is like, we don't send people there because they could see something that would make them not want to be Sanctus anymore. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I wonder what's going to be. And then it's like, oh, it's not like a subtle thing or a little thing. It's the religion is a lie.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big spoiler at that point. But I mean, if you're listening just this far in, but like, yeah. And also, if you couldn't tell, like it was like,
I mean, like
the corrupt church
exactly,
on the nose from the get go. And it's like, okay, cool. Well, is Luis Eddie good? It's like, no, he's bad too. Like there's no, he's like, what if Trump was actually like charismatic and like good at stuff? Like very much like an authoritarian. I'm like, they're really like being like, hey, our two choices are the really shitty status quo or an authoritarian utilitarian society. Like, those are your choices. And it's like, fuck that.
Yeah. It's like, oh, how timely. It's like, no, this is always a timely thing.
Yep.
It's it's pure coincidence that it's coming out, during our 2024 election cycle. But it's, if this had dropped 2 years ago, 4 years ago, it would have been the same kind of like, man, that's those are kind of the vibes of the political election, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff. And yeah, like especially, like up through where you're at, so much of like this big grandiose competition that they're doing is all like the church exploiting and turning this thing into their own thing so they can game the system, compared to what the big king in the sky had said up front of like anybody can do this, and the church being like, well, we're gonna set the parameters. And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? The big king in the sky set the parameters. We don't have to abide by your rules or anything like that. But when you have so many people buying into it, that's the only way you're going to get TV time or whatever.
It's just the entire idea of like exploitation of inherent systems.
Yeah, and especially the second challenge here that you're doing of like, go rob tombs for relics from other civilizations so that we can make them our own.
Hey, your second challenge is colonizing. Go do it. And it's just but like, and you like, I love the aspect of it, like, because you're questioned like, why are you doing it differently by some of the characters, and they're like, just kill the savages and get the treasure and be done. And it's like, first off, that ain't cool. And then second off, it's like, there's a better way to do this. Like, especially because they introduced the leader of the Polynesian Southeastern Asian cultural people in this game. They introduce them, and
I believe the Mubari.
The Mubari, and then Eldini, maybe. Adini,
the chief.
Adini,
the chief.
Adini is he's originally a competitor. He finishes the first like round, and he has a lot of backing from people who are like, wow, that guy's like brought in a big head for that, and it's like cool. And then he finds out what the second challenge is, which is essentially like, and he's just like, no, like this is messed up. I'm going back. Like, screw your competition. I'm going back home. And it's like
Mustari, not Mubari. Mubari is the dog
dogs from Dragon Age.
Yeah.
The Mustari are awesome. I immediately was like, your first instance with them is like, what the hell is with this culture and these guys? And then you get deeper into it and you're like, I really dig this. I really vibe with it. There's a lot of like this is a hard people that have been through a lot of hardships, but they have really good people here who are like, surprisingly, as an Elda, the least racist place I've been to. They're like, well, you're just all outsiders. And it's like, oh, but it's not because you're not being specifically racist towards me. It's just all outsiders. And then like, we don't see you as outsiders anymore. And it's like, what an accepting group of people. Like, and it's like, it makes sense why the Sanctus all hate them. And like, why this like regular status quo is just like, these guys are savages. And it's like, are they? Because they seem to be like the chillest people here. Yeah, it's just awesome. Also, shout out to teleporting all over the map places you've already been to. Mm-hmm. That's rad.
That's right. Yeah, you hadn't been able to do that yet.
Yep.
Yeah, like last week when we talked, and I was like, "Where are you at?" And you're like, "I just got my third party member, Grius." I was like, "Okay, that's where you're at," knowing that Grius was about to die for you.
Yeah, no, I had gotten my third party member after, because I had gotten to the point where Grius had.
No, you hadn't.
Oh, I hadn't.
Not when we recorded.
Oh, sorry, you're right.
No.
You're right. Never mind. I take it back.
Not when we recorded last week. Yeah, like by the time I'm sure when we were together for the Plus show, yes. But yeah, as when we recorded this conversation last week, you were talking about how you had just gotten Grius and you had assigned a new archetype to him, and
yeah, oh, that's right, because I was prepping for the assassination attempt on Luis.
Yep.
Yeah, I have to say, I will also say, villains being done extremely well, like, which is not surprising. They like the OG, like Persona 3, 4, and 5 team have always been really great about their villains. But I think this is some of the best ones. Like Luis there's a scene between him and Stoll where like Stroll is just like, where Stroll confronts him and without even missing
this is at the party?
At the party.
Yeah.
Stroll confronts him and it's without even a fucking blink, just been like, yeah, I did. Like, I did that. Yeah. Like,
yeah. Are we going to have a problem? No? Then shut up.
I didn't feel it was like, shut up. It's like, you understand, like, yes, I did it because I needed to. It needed to happen. Like, I'm not sorry that I did it, but like, it's sad that it happened. And I'm like, I feel bad for you, but this is it. And you're either on board with me or you're not. And I almost call him Herschel, but Heisme comes over and like says like, sorry about, and they're like, no, it's good, it's refreshing. Like, we're surrounded by sycophants who just like want to like who just want to like just hobnob with Luis. Having somebody come in and be like, I'm challenging your belief on this because it directly hurt me. And for Luis to just own it is like, it's a great distinction between him and the Sanctus, where these guys are just like conniving dickbags, and I love them. I love to hate them. Mm-hmm. I love to hate the Sanctus.
Yeah.
Because the Sanctus just showed up and like, well, they're good. Like, they're good. Like, they're the churches are going to oppose Luis. They believe in like, that him killing the king is wrong. That's not a spoiler. That's in literally the opening cutscene of the game. But Luis doing that is like, it's wrong that he did that. It's like, yeah, it is wrong. And then and it's like, but it's also really messed up. The Sanctus being kind of the institutional policy that is enforcing the like racism between the different peoples and different tribes.
Yep. And keeping everybody under its thumb.
Yep.
Remember
what I said about the ruling class and like getting everybody underneath them to hate each other and fight each other?
It's been very fun. Because I think we talked about this last week. I named my protagonist Taizen.
I did not know that. No, you didn't tell me that.
Oh, I didn't?
That's awesome.
Yeah, who is my D&D character in our campaign where I'm the cleric. at odds with the greater church and whatnot. And so
There you go.
the fact that Tizen in this game is also at odds with the greater church is like, all right, I'm exercising a lot of these demons from my childhood, in video game form and in D&D form. So yeah.
Fighting against authority, like the mass authoritarians in your life. Yeah. No, it's been great. I've just been so blown away by the characterization and everything. Combat's been superb. I really just don't know, like I don't know if this will end up beating out Remake for me, but
there's definitely going to be a like, do I enjoy this because of a recency bias or because it's a better thing? I think is going to be the fun examination to have with this, because I'm in a similar camp where I don't anticipate this game is going to do anything that's going to really suddenly drop its
for you, because where you're
for
at.
me and compared to where I'm at. It could pull an FF16 and I'd just be like, well, that ending is the 100% wrong ending for me and what I wanted out of this experience. So I don't think it's going to do that. That's not typically what Persona does. If anything, it's just going to be like, all right, well, that went a little bit more bonkers than I was expecting, but
Sure.
Whatever. It was still fun and I had a good time with it. We ended up fighting God again. All right, that's a normal thing that you do in all of these games.
You literally that's kind of the whole story of Persona is
Yeah.
like, oh, there's a deity.
Here's the big bad that you've had like a relationship with over the course of this game, and now we've swept him aside, and here's the god that you have to fight after him.
And here's the god that's been behind the scenes that you've been interacting with without knowing it the entire game.
Yeah, and that's something I've dealt with growing up from Final Fantasy II. So it's like, like Ultimecia is in a scene of the game or something like that in FF8, or like Axel and stuff like that. It's like there are so many of these the person who's really pulling the strings. But anyway, for me there is there is especially in the JRPG-esque space with this, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It's like, there's three things that are any given day you could ask me, and I'd have probably a different thought in terms of which one stands out to me in this moment or all these things. So, but also fascinating in terms of they're all doing some things very similar, but they're all doing things with their stories in such a diverse sense that is just fascinating to behold. I want to know, since I believe you've unlocked most, if not all, of the followers, apart from maybe one remaining party member.
Yeah.
Do you have any standouts in terms of your followers?
Yes, I do. I did not expect. I think it's Brigitte is her name. Brigitte. Did not expect the taking care of a dog to
Brigitte.
Brigitte, thank you, Brigitte, to turn into the story that it was. I have her at a 7. I'm waiting to get to the final one where I can build her up to an 8. Alonzo, I will say there's a lot of twists and turns for some of these non-party member followers that are really great. The only one that's gone as I've expected it so far is the Maria one. Mm-hmm. But even that has had some serious levels of depth to it. And I will protect this baby girl.
Yeah, Maria giving super Nanako vibes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, what if Nanako's story was sadder? And that's Maria. I helped her. The last thing we did is we built the new sign for and it's just
even those, I like that there's a variety in how you interact with each of those subplot, like the stuff with Norris, for example, where it's you only get his when you find the relics in the dungeons and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. The little side dungeons, side questy places. You found one. Okay, now you'll get another scene with him and get a little bit more of his backstory and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, Nurse is awesome. By the way, he's so great. I love a kooky inventor. He is a relatively less kooky than you would expect from a game, but he is for sure the Sid of this game. He is the the kooky inventor. He is your like, but he's so posh. He's so posh and.
Except for when he's drunk out of his ass.
Yeah, and those are great moments. I love those moments. He's great. I love him. He's fantastic. He can do no wrong. Yeah, no, I will say a lot of the followers that are non-party member followers are just straight up like my babies. I will protect them. Yeah, I think Dalton is his name. The
Barton.
Barton, thank you, Barton.
Barton.
Barton is interesting because it's like you have dialogue options to be like, hey, dude, writing's on the wall. Pay attention to that. And it's I'm at a point now where I need to go do like the last thing for like I have to go fight I'm at rank 6 with him, and I need to get to rank 7, which is fighting this like monster.
You gotta go do a side quest with him.
Yep. Which is great. But also, I found out later was like I'm like, what level are people for this quest? And they're like 50 to 70. I was like, cool. I was like 20 something at the time, and I was like,
I mean, I feel like I was probably in my 40s or something like that, and when I looked it up, it was like the enemy's like a level 60 enemy or something like that. It's like, okay, I've fought a few of those where I'm at. If I have, the right build.
Yeah, if you have the right combo and build to go on, then you can definitely take it on, which is also another nice thing too. It's like you can take on these much stronger enemies, but it just requires the right tactics around it.
Yeah. And I like that in the dungeons where you can use the face sight and basically see like, oh, are these blue, yellow, or red? Oh, if they're red, okay, like you might want to think twice about like those are the ones that if they're red and I'm low on MP or something like that, I'm gonna maybe just avoid them instead of even if I can get in there and do like the stun attack for them to take out a chunk of their HP before the fight. I'm still probably gonna be like, all right, it's not worth it for me based on where I'm at and what I still need to do in this dungeon. So I'm just going to avoid those options instead.
See, I still fight them, not in squad mode. I fight them in overworld. I do the stun on them.
And then I just
run past them.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's my thing. It's like, oh, I really don't want to use the resources to fight this guy, or I don't have the resources to fight this guy. But he's still going to like chase after me. And if he hits me, I'm in a really bad place.
Yeah.
And I can't like because he's going to get auto hits on me and that could wipe me out or something like that.
Yeah.
So instead I knock them out, I stun them, and then I just run past them instead. Yeah. That is a go-to tactic for me on many occasions.
And I'm just saying, I just don't even bother like engaging with them. I kind of keep clear of them so that they don't like see me or chase after me.
Yeah, but if I knock them out, then I can murder all their little blue guys around them.
Well, I mean, I still try and take those guys out too.
That's free XP. That's free XP. You don't leave that on the table.
Yep, some XP, some gold, some mag. Any other elements or thoughts you want to call out? What'd you think of once you got? Because you didn't even have the runner last time we talked about it.
No.
Once you get the runner, and like you have those sequences where like, oh, you're traveling from one place to another, and either you're going to encounter another runner on the road and have a battle against one of the other candidates.
Those are awesome. When we talked for that D Plus show this week, I talked about running the old dude. That's been awesome. That's one of my favorite things to do is to fight those jabronis.
Yeah. Also, did you do since you're now at the Gauntlet Runner with like water capabilities, obviously in the island stuff? Did you do some fishing?
I did do some fishing. Yeah.
Okay.
Fishing's fine. I wish it was more of a mini game, but
it's a mini game in terms of like the response, like. Whatever Heisme says and the response you give changes what your reward's going to be.
Yeah.
Basically, is the thing there.
I was hoping for more of an actual like fishing mini game.
Sure,
but that's just me.
I like it's such a small chunk of the game and small part of it that I was perfectly okay with it being that.
Sure.
Especially because I was really only doing it to get the stuff I needed to cook all the meals. That was another thing. Because where you're at, I believe Maria's leveled up enough that like now it doesn't take an afternoon to cook a meal. You get it basically. It's all speedy cooking or whatever.
Yep, speedy cooking. I did that.
That's a good one. I think eventually she gives you one where it's like, oh, you get like one extra like when you cook.
That's probably on my list. I only have her at like a rank 6 right now, so I'm pretty sure that's going to be 7 to 10 or 7 to like
7 or 8.
7 or 8, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
Without getting like super into spoilers, I don't think so. Like,
Yeah.
this is a very story-driven game, so it makes sense about that. We got two the Interstate shows where we've just talked basically about mechanics and some slight story stuff. Like, I will say one of the things I'm still super curious about is, and this is kind of like one of the plot hooks that's really got me, is the memoriam refers to the Elda, like their persecution of the Elda is related to the kind of magic that they have, and I have not yet seen what that is about yet. That is a thing that keeps on. That is a scratch on the back of my brain, or like an itch on the back of my brain that I can't reach, and I want to get to that. But I've also been avoiding all wikis and spoilers and stuff. I just really want to get it naturally through the game.
Yeah.
It's been. I've had such a fun time with this world and these people. And it is, I think one of the things I love most about it is the theme of hope. Hope oftentimes that I feel is like a very cringy or blasé sort of story beat that people use, or it's like, yeah, we're going to believe in hope. And here it really feels more like all we have is hope. And we're investing in that hope and we're believing in that hope. Everything we're doing with like the hope that this will work out. These are far-fetched plans that really have no right to succeed, but they're all we got, and that's all we have that we can believe in, and so we're just gonna give it our all. And there is that idea of like running on fumes when it comes to a lot of the plans in the game, like in the story for your party, and like the kind of just like massive change-ups that you have to handle. Like one of the things I love most is like, anytime I think I'm in a familiar beat from a Persona game, I'm immediately taken on a left-hand turn on it. Like there's one thing where it's like, oh, it's going to be a heist, and I'm sneaking through the base and everything, and it's like I'm going to get to the end point, and I was like, okay, I'm here, and like where am I going to do? And it's like, no, turn that all on its literally on its side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is not what you think is going to happen, and then you get to the point, and you're like, wait a minute. Because the reveal that happened with like one of the characters and everything there is just awesome, and brought up a plot point that I had forgotten about that gets brought up by the characters when this whole thing happens. Yeah. And I'm like, I forgot about this. I forgot about what Grius said back then, because I've been so sad about his death.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, overall, this, and the thing is, like, Grius is not in your party for very long, but he immediately endears himself as like, he is your like leader on this mission. But also he has such incredible belief and faith in you, and even Stroll, who just like literally randomly joins the party at one point. Like, it's incidental that like everything that happens with Stroll kind of like brings him in, that it does feel like fate.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think this is like a holdover from the Persona games, where you did have a much more silent protagonist, that like so many scenes are so centered around Stroll giving like the exposition, or like, you know, talking on behalf of the party or the team or something like that, or laying out the plan or something like that, where it's like, all right, realistically, I feel like this would be the captain's plan, aka your protagonist, but because they, you know, don't want to take away that agency from you of coming up with the plan or something like that, they put it in another character and kind of make, like, they just kind of shift over, okay, Stroll's going to be the lead for a little bit to, you know, roll out this chunk of the thing and kind of tell us what the, you know, the next big challenge is, the next big story beat is, and then we go back into the gameplay stuff.
Yeah, that is very much like it's shared between all of the.
I guess like Stroll and Hulkenberg are maybe the two,
and Heisman.
I mean, like, I don't.
Heisman does not take the lead role on that unless it, like, there's a couple moments where he takes a big lead on it for like the speaking role of the group, but it's rare. It is mostly Hulkenberg and it's mostly Stroll, almost entirely Stroll. But here's the thing, that is very much like the like Yusuke, Ryuji, like role that you expect out of Persona.
That's what I'm saying. Is like it's very much a carryover from that archetype of like, hey, here's your second companion, and because you're a silent protagonist, he's going to be the one doing all the talking for everybody.
Yep.
And here it's like, well, he doesn't need to be doing all the talking, but you've still kept that like the choice that you've made here, which I feel like could be a like you've given a voice to this protagonist and you've given us the option to like choose what he says at times. So I would have preferred maybe some of these other things being his plan or his words and stuff like that, compared to him being more reactionary, I think, than maybe he needs to be for the story that they're telling.
Yep. One thing I do think that they improved on, because the whole thing about like it was Ryuji was like kind of like the butt monkey, but also he was like the explainer and the expositioner. On that same note, this time it's really more of like a like, yes, they like Hulkenberg and Stroll will be, hey, this is the exposition, and then they turn to you for like, did I miss anything? Like what is our next step?
Does that sound good? Or
does that sound good?
Like what, 3 options to say. Yep, some form of yep, I'm in.
Or there's moments where it's like,
we're gonna do this all together. Yep.
Or there's moments where it's like, no, actually, that's not going to work, and here's why. And your main character gets to be like, actually, guys, you forgot about this, or you didn't think about this thing. And everybody kind of has like a big, like, there are moments where you do take leadership with what you say, and getting it fully voiced is nice. It's not just like a dialogue.
Yeah.
You have a long, like, you have this conversation with this person, da-da-da-da-da. Instead, it's like you are actually participating and having a conversation with them and their follower links and stuff.
Yeah. There are also a couple, though, that are like, here are the 3 choices. One of them is the right choice. We'll let you make the other choices, but another character is going to like steer you back and then basically just give you those choices again until you get the right one.
Yeah, that happens a couple of times.
Been like, oh, that was a little. I wish you'd give me a little bit more freedom to play within the lines there. But
well, the thing I like about it is it's not just that when you do that and you bring it up, that people like, it's not like a no, that's not going to work, because it's not one of those like obviously wrong ones. It's a all 3 of these are viable.
Maybe you didn't think about this element.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
All 3 are viable approaches, and so it's really more of like the group dynamic is much more lively than in a Persona game that I recall. Like the interaction of like people like, oh, hey, here's an idea. Like, so when you choose one of those 3 at once and it's not the quote unquote right choice, it causes more of a conversation. It's not just like a no, leader, remember that's not going to work because of this. Instead, it's like, that's a good idea, and then you explore that idea. They explore that idea a little bit, and they're like, but wait, it's not going to work because of this.
I've had at least one that was like a line saying no, and then you go back and choose the next answer or something like that. So
the one I'm thinking of is the one where it's like I didn't know the quote unquote correct answer, and so I explored those other options, and I had like a like actual like talking point. It was, I would get more specific about it, but it is a major spoiler point. So.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be back with more thoughts on this next week. I will certainly be done with the game by next week. Jury's out on how far you'll get for next week's episode. But
I have 3 jobs, but on the flip side of that, my parents are out of town, and so I will not have like, I have like a list of stuff I need to get done, but like, you know, I won't have any like quote unquote family engagements that I normally have to have because I'm living with my parents.
Sure. So yeah, we'll see next week if we have a full review / spoiler cast kind of thing, or if we're just doing like one more of these chats before we get to that point. So stay tuned for more of our thoughts on Metaphor ReFantazio next week. I will switch over to We Live in Time as kind of the little wrap up here. As I said, this is the new movie with Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh that like came out in limited release last week, wide release this weekend. Small little like love story romance kind of thing. Great performances. I'm going to say that up front. Like Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh like knock this thing out of the park and are delivering in every little scene they're in. The movie itself, I wish were better in support of the performances that they're giving. Mm-hmm. And I'll say that in terms of like the movie, for a good chunk of the runtime, is structured in like a 500 Days of Summer style, where they're kind of jumping around in the love story of these 2 characters. But then it just kind of at a point just becomes like a linear thing for like the last half or third of the movie or something like that. And it's like, well, why did you... There was no real rhyme or reason to why you told the story in the order that you've told the story. And I think that's probably a little criticism of 500 Days of Summer as well. But like with 500 Days of Summer, it was like the gimmick and the thing that was new about that. Whereas this is like, well, it just kind of feels like a 500 Days of Summer thing, but with less quirky, The Cure or whatever. The Smiths.
Gosh, also if you like that has not aged greatly because of like how the lead singer of the Smiths has been in politically in the last couple of years.
I don't follow any of that, so I don't care.
Yeah, that's fair.
But the movie itself, like it has that weird structure, the weird narrative structure to it that feels too often for me like it is being a cop out on giving like the end of a beat of characters.
Okay.
Like there will be big dramatic tension kind of arguments or scenes between characters, and it cuts away from that to a different point in time, and we don't get any kind of like resolution. What's up?
Oh, I just accidentally knocked my mic.
Okay.
Not a technical issue. Just I literally just like accidentally bumped it. I was like, oh no.
Gotcha. Yeah. So yeah, they kind of like, instead of giving like a satisfying resolution of like how this character responded to this other character making the decision they made, they just kind of jump in time to a different point in their relationship. And, depending on how the story plays out, you can kind of infer, things clearly ended okay, or they came to some sort of agreement or something from that last conversation. But I think it cheapens some of the like the stakes that the movie is trying to set. The broader picture, I'll say, for this relationship, we kind of go over the course of the movie. We see like the beginning of this relationship in a very like over the top sense. It's in the movie trailers, but like Florence Pugh's character Almut is an aspiring chef. Andrew Garfield's character is Tobias, a like data scientist for a cereal company. I believe Weetamix is, I think, what they go with. And he's going through divorce, and he's walking back to his hotel in a bathrobe for various reasons that are kind of like from a scene played for a little bit of laughs. He drops something, walks out into the street, and Almut hits him with the car, and he comes to in the hospital. She's sitting across from him. She has taken him to the hospital, and like that's their meet cute.
That's wait, so he's in the middle of a divorce?
Yeah, he's in the middle of a divorce.
What the hell?
They have this little meet cute where he walks out into traffic. She hits him with the car, takes him to the hospital, and they hit it off. He goes to her restaurant, a little bit later.
But they hit it off,
and that becomes their. That wasn't even intentional. He goes to her restaurant, and their relationship grows and blossoms from there. She is very like free spirited, kind of like very driven. Again, she's this great chef. She's great at her own restaurant. She's running her own restaurant. At one point, another chef's like, "Congrats on the star," that.
Oh,
kind
dang!
of stuff.
Okay.
Whereas he's a much meeker, like kind of data-driven kind of person, not too wide out of their shell. So it's very much an opposites attract kind of story. And in those opposites attract conversations, the topic of like, a family comes up early on in their relationship, and that leads to tension. And again, because the movie kind of cuts around in terms of like the narrative, we circle back to somewhere, and then we kind of come back to it. And but then there's also this complication, and like I guess part of the interesting narrative structure is a lot of these are all introduced in some form or fashion in like the first 5 minutes of the movie, and then we get more context by revisiting time periods and stuff like that in their relationship. And so the third kind of big beat, I would say, of that kind of chunk is Almut is also going through ovarian cancer. She gets a diagnosis for cancer. We find out it's kind of her second brush with cancer. She had one early on in the relationship. And what does she want to do? And they have a daughter together by this point, and she the movie has some interesting things, and Florence Pugh like bites into these really well in terms of like what kind of choices am I going to make with this kind of prognosis, where I might not, have long to live. How do I want to live the fullest life I can, or do I want to resign myself to trying treatment, and maybe that treatment's going to not pan out, and so I'll have just wasted a year of my life dying slowly and quietly. And maybe there's more things I want to do. And so there are a lot of tensions between just these two characters and their lifestyles, and the tensions make for great films, make for great scenes and great dialogue and great emotion, high beats, and like really ramping up the intensity of scenes. But then we get beats where it's like, okay, and that scene ends on a high thing, and we can see from a later scene, we can infer how something played out. But there are also things where it's like, okay, but I still would rather have seen how that played out.
Sure.
It's very much a show don't tell kind of thing for a lot of beats, and it feels like the structure of the movie kind of like is intentional to prevent, whatever you're going to do wasn't going to be as satisfying as the conflict. The resolution wasn't going to be as satisfying as the conflict, so you just didn't do the resolution and just jumped to another conflict point.
That feels kind of shitty.
Yeah. So that's like the biggest like frustration of the film is like these things. It has a lot of interesting things to say, but then it doesn't follow through on some of those things and some of the tension points and the complex emotional beats that you're going to have in the situations that they're kind of confronting and these characters are dealing with and addressing. And then there are just also like over the top things where it's like, I saw somebody else kind of describe this as like is very melodramatic in terms of like the grandiose nature of these stories. The example that I've given of the meet cute is she hit him with her car is not the only there's no real way that would happen kind of situation. There are a few of those over the course of this movie that are like, all right, now you're playing with like heightened storytelling to, invoke a particular response. And those are fine and fun, but it also then leaves the like, oh, you're kind of using cinematic tricks rather than telling a
cohesive story,
fulfilling full story. You're kind of doing the like, it's like, oh, you're trying to do the tearjerkers, but you've also introduced this like really intense conflict, and you've like had one character really, really hurt the other character emotionally, and then the next scene we see them together, all's good, they're okay, they're dealing with it, they've moved on, and we didn't get that like that middle ground of like living with the hurt or resolving the hurt. We just moved past it. And I think the movie has too many of those beats. But again, like the structure and the storytelling in the movie is weaker than I would like, but this is very much Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh are elevating everything they're doing and taking each of these scenes and pulling it up to an 11 kind of thing. And so they're great throughout. The chemistry that they have with one another is fantastic and lovely, and just a joy. Like they're both a joy to watch on screen for this, even when they're doing things where it's like, oh, this is not. I don't like this for your relationship. I don't like the decisions you're making. But like you understand why they're making those decisions because of the life that they've put into these characters. So it's a. Ultimately, I think I fall on, in terms of like our grading scale, this is an 8 for me. A great movie. It's a 7 script with like 9.5 performances is basically how I've kind of like come to that as the average. Like it's an okay script or a good script, but like amazing performances that like elevate what otherwise would have been a maybe a little bit more forgettable movie. It is also again dealing with like the intensity of cancer treatments and and the the grief and the loss around those kinds of ideas, and what do you leave behind, what is left behind, and so they grapple with some interesting things, just not as much as I would have liked. I think based on like what they introduce, I would have liked to have seen them go a little further with everything. But yeah, overall, real good. A great time, and you know, like a 2-hour thing of a couple of the best actors out there today doing their thing, knocking it out of the park with one another, in a very charming way, even if the script doesn't do as much for me as I would have liked, given the talent involved, I would say.
Yep. It's interesting. These movies always very fascinate me because there's a long lineage of like these kinds of movies. And when I think about it, I think about like Love Story from the 70s, which is I think like the OG one. It is like it's the one that has that great quote at the very end of which is love means never having to say you're sorry. It's funny too because I think the last time when we talk about heightened storytelling, there's always these movies, whether it's, I think the charm and uniqueness of 500 Days of Summer that it has is that its heightened storytelling is done emotionally rather than like through like story beats. And I don't think anything will ever top heightened storytelling like Remember Me with Robert Pattinson, which is the one where it's a very like New York love story. Everything seems to be buttoned up at the end, and then it turns out at the very end, when he's going to have lunch with his dad, Robert Pattinson's character is going to have lunch with his dad, you find out that actually that day that he's having lunch with his dad is September 11th, 2001. And he dies in 9/11. And like, to me, that will always be like the what? Like what? But it's not like it is a fundamental, like the way you talked about it and the way that I've seen people talk about this movie. When you mentioned it at the top of the show before we recorded, I was like, I don't think I've heard of that because I misheard you say the name of the movie. But like I've seen other people talk about it. And the way they describe it is like it really hangs on the performances, like you were saying. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if I want to see this movie because I cannot think of like how frustrated I would be that they don't have resolutions. I think A Marriage Story is one of those movies that is kind of the flip opposite of sure, yeah. On these movies. It's kind of like the inverse of all these like lineage of movies with love stories, in that it is all about resolutions, where that movie is all about those critical arguments and then what resolutions come from them. And I feel like it's interesting when you were talking about it, I couldn't help but think about like the satisfaction I got from watching Marriage Story, where it is telling its story and it is telling the story of like the end of this marriage and everything, but it's giving you nothing but resolution to the conflicts. When they skip around with time, it's immediately like you find out an immediate resolution of like what was the actual result of that argument that they had. And so it sounds a little frustrating that it doesn't do that in this movie. But at the same time, like I really love Florence Pugh and I really love Andrew Garfield, and I really like seeing two beautiful Hollywood people do a love story, do a love movie. So I might end up checking this one out when it gets on streaming.
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, definitely take a look at it when it's out on streaming. It's fascinating. There, like, if you know the persona of Andrew Garfield and you know the persona of Florence Pugh, there were moments in this movie where I was like, oh, this is why Florence Pugh signed on to the movie, and this is why Andrew Garfield signed on to the movie. Like there, like in terms of and the Florence Pugh thought that I had is way more superficial, and I'm sure she has a ton of other reasons. But like her being a chef and like her getting to do a lot of cooking scenes and stuff like that. If you watched any Cooking with Flo stuff over the, especially during the pandemic, she got really into cooking and like using that as a communal experience with her audience and stuff like that. And so her having her own restaurant, having her chefs, her like one of her things in this is she basically is doing like some big European competition in cooking that is multiple times talked about as like the Olympics of cooking. And so she's out there trying to like do that and juggle that with like cancer treatment and stuff like that. And that's that's where some of the tension's going to lie, certainly. So there's, I think, a lot of like those kind of elements, and then this being ultimately a story about how to prepare for grief, or how can one prepare for grief, or what do you do if you're grieving, is very much, I think, Andrew Garfield in response to
his mother passing.
As we've seen, which he talks about so eloquently. I occasionally will just go back and like rewatch an interview he did on Colbert where he talks about it. He recently just came out with a thing with Elmo where he's talking about talking to Elmo from Sesame Street about grieving his mother's passing and stuff. And so I think I think that is a core element of this film that like he was tapping into, that allowed him that opportunity to kind of like grieve his mother through this art as well.
That's awesome.
And so again, like, both of their performances through the roof, knocking it out of the park, and they have a ton of like meaty things to do. I wouldn't be surprised if these were like award-nominated performances. I don't think the movie will be like anything particularly like awards heavy, apart from maybe their performances. But still, lots of fun to be had in this one if you like those couple of actors. So yeah, those are my thoughts on We Live in Time. Any final questions or anything like that before we move on?
I do not.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you, Cam, for joining me to chat all of these things. You can follow Cameron at RevCabot, 2 B's and 2 T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, we just did Can of Worms on That D Plus show. We had a lot to say about that show, and the show, like, if you're wondering like how it went,
Not great.
The movie is so bad it literally almost ruined That D Plus show.
No, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't go that far. But Cameron did have like a technical thing that happened in the middle of the episode that when I went back and was editing it, I would have been very content and very happy to just be like, well, we're just scrapping that episode and Can of Worms is just going to never air. But it was a thing I was able to fix. Yeah. So,
which is also why if you watch this episode and all of a sudden you see Trevor worry about, because I like
panic because Cameron's doing something while I'm trying to talk about the movie, and and me being like, hey, don't click things around. Don't break your shit. That's where that's stepping from. Hot on the heels of That D Plus show, Can of Worms. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. Following up on Can of Worms, we'll be wrapping up our Halloween month here on That D Plus show this week with our annual tradition of Treehouse of Horror. We're going to be doing Treehouse of Horror 10, 11, and 12. As we have been doing 3 episodes each year for the last few years. So stay tuned for that. It'll go out on Friday. I believe Logan's planning on joining us for that because he always loves jumping in and chatting Simpsons with us. So, stay tuned for that later this week. If you like what you heard, you can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site or go to thatnerdysite.com for the latest from us. Please remember to rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you again for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.